Episode 37, The Paradox.
Welcome to The Paradox with your attending, Dr. Eric Larson. He is a practicing anesthesiologist and clinical assistant professor at Michigan State University College of Human Medicine. Listen in as he takes you behind the scenes of what practicing medicine in today's ever-changing world is like with another doctor. The Paradox is a fun and accidentally informative show for physicians, patients, or anyone who has ever found themselves in a waiting room.
Welcome to The Paradox. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Larson. Thanks again for joining me for another episode. Today we're going to be discussing opting out as a specialist for physicians. We spent a lot of time talking about direct primary care as an alternative way of delivering healthcare, as leaving the third-party payer system, meaning you have someone else paying for your health insurance, whether that's a government payer like Medicare or Medicaid, or a commercial payer like Aetna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, etc. And so you have a direct financial relationship with the patient and the physician, much like the way you get any other services or products in the market today. When you go to the grocery store, you're paying the grocery store. You're not paying someone else to buy the groceries for you, who then might choose what sort of groceries you can purchase and how much you can spend on them, all the while charging you a premium for that service. Today's guest is Dr. Ellen McKnight. She's a rheumatologist in private practice in Pensacola, Florida. She's opted out of the government payers Medicare and Medicaid a number of years ago, which allows her to remove a lot of the burdensome regulations that go along with having those payers. She's also almost completely eliminated herself from all other third-party payers and has gotten to an almost pure cash-based system with very affordable prices. She's been able to maintain her practice the way she wants, not be overloaded with regulations and electronic health records that don't work. Instead, she's been able to practice and provide care for her patients with an infusion center for their convenience as well. I think if you're a specialist, you find this an inspiring story and potentially something to chew on to think about maybe this is a different way to practice. And as a patient, hopefully you can look at this and decide that maybe the way we are doing things right now needs to be rethought as well, whether that's using Medicare for your care or another traditional insurance. It really becomes an interesting discussion as we look even at Medicare for all, which has been proposed by some politicians and those in the media. We have to question whether it's entirely free, because not only do you have to pay for it in taxes, but also even if you look at Medicare now being provided to senior citizens, they often have to have supplemental insurance, and there's an expectation for paying part of it too. So is there perhaps a different way of providing this care? There are a number of links and references back to past episodes. These will all be linked in the show notes page, as well as a video of a talk Dr. McKnight gave recently at a direct primary care conference in Orlando, Florida, entitled The Activated Physician. Those can all be found at theparadox.com, that's P-A-R-A-D-O-C-S, paradox.com/037. As well, you can go to patreon.com/theparadox and become a patron supporter of the show, where all money raised goes towards the production and the promotion of the show. But without further ado, Dr. Ellen McKnight and how to operate as a specialist outside the third-party system. Enjoy. I'm with my new friend, Dr. Ellen McKnight, who lives in Pensacola and has been practicing rheumatology for a number of years. She recently opened the Summit Arthritis Infusion Clinic, where she's all by herself, as she said. She grew up in New Orleans, attended LSU College of Medicine Medical School, trained in rheumatology in New Orleans as well. She's married to an ophthalmologist, which we joke in anesthesia is barely a physician. Hopefully your husband doesn't listen to the podcast. But I'd like to welcome to the show to talk about your practice and sort of what's going on in medicine.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to having a conversation about what we're doing here in Pensacola to try to get patients access to care. And I'm looking forward to having that conversation with you.
Well, let's begin with sort of, I guess, how I discovered you. I've had a number of discussions with direct primary care physicians, and for those who have not listened, I'd recommend there are about 5 episodes I've done. But it's just the way of, it's sort of people who've left and by people I mean physicians, who've left the third-party payer system, which means you're not using insurance to get your care. Mm-hmm. There are a number of specialties in medicine traditionally who've been outside that system. I think plastic surgeons are the most obvious ones for the cosmetic portion of care. No one expects to have a breast augmentation paid for by their insurance. But outside of that, maybe some ophthalmologists who do LASIKs and some other procedures. Most of medicine has operated within the third-party system. I'm in anesthesia, and clearly we spend with a lot of our time dealing with third-party payers for surgery. You're a rheumatologist.
Mm-hmm.
So you treat, as I jokingly referred to in a couple episodes ago, the rheumatism, which is a term we don't really is not really a term that we use in medicine anymore, since we're much more focused on specific labels of actual treating diseases.
Right.
And so why don't you go through your career, because you're past mid-career, I suppose, somewhere.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
My hunch.
Yes.
What did you moved to Florida at some point? Kind of go through your practice and sort of how you got to where you are right now.
So after I finished up my fellowship, my husband and I moved to Pensacola, and I worked for 15 and a half years in a musculoskeletal multi-specialty group. We had orthopedists, rheumatology. I was the only rheumatologist, pain medicine, physiatry, and it was a great setup. And that went for about 15 and a half years. And then various things occurred. And I decided to go out on my own 10 years ago. So I actually started Summit Arthritis Infusion in 2009. And then after that, when I first got into that first year of practice, I took every single insurance, Medicaid, Medicare, you name it, third parties. And then about a year in, I realized that Medicare was telling me over and over again through their emails from CMS that what they were going to do is to start penalizing me in either 2015 or 2016 if I did not adopt the what I call the junky clunky EHR, and start doing things like meaningless use and all the rest of it. And I said, I knew to myself at that time that unless something dramatically changed with the EHR, I was not going to do that. So in 2010, I stopped accepting new Medicare patients into my practice, which at the time to the other rheumatologists seemed a little bit like, are you kidding me? They couldn't believe what I was doing. And then ultimately it was January 1st, 2016 when I did ultimately opt out. And so I had prepared to some degree my practice for that transition. And so now I'm at the end of I guess the beginning of my fourth year of opt-out now. I've had 3 complete years of opted out of Medicare as a rheumatologist. And I'm doing just fine, and my patients are doing just fine. And the way I like to say it is I gave up on the Medicare system, not the Medicare patient, because I still see a lot of Medicare patients. They come in and pay what I call my fair cash pricing, and I'll be happy to kind of go over with you what I decided to do and how I incentivize patients to come in and see me for their chronic illness. Interestingly enough, though, prior to opting out of Medicare, I had stepped out of Medicaid because I was seeing Medicaid patients, but Medicaid was doing all sorts of things where they were paying me like 1 penny and 1 nickel, this kind of thing, and they were sort of really messing up my accounting. And so I decided that I would step out of Medicaid. When I made that decision, I did that very abruptly. I didn't warn those patients as I did with my Medicare patients as to what was coming. So I told them, I said, look, I will see you. These are the Medicaid patients. And I didn't have a huge number of them. I said, I'll see you for the next 6 months for free. And that will give you time, because it takes time for those patients to establish with another doctor. So I said, it'll take,
Sure.
So you'll have the time to establish, or here are my fair cash prices, or you can come in and you can pay me. So I have an interesting story. During that little time, I had one of the patients who was Medicaid, I was seeing her during that 6 month period for free. Well, one of the visits she comes in and she has not 1, not 2, but 3 new lip piercings, and I was like, okay, there's something is so wrong with all of this. Now I still see her to this day. I didn't even say anything to her because I didn't say, well, I'll see you for free if you don't get tattoos or lip piercings, or, I didn't spell that part of it out, So anyway, long story short, I went ahead and both of those eventually, I'm opted out of, I don't know if you use the term, I'm disenrolled from Medicaid and I'm opted out of Medicare. And this year I'm starting to go out of network with third parties. So I did that. I think it was Cigna is the one that I've done first here in Pensacola. And I'm going to transition out of that, and then I'll give that 6 months, and then I'll choose another one. And I'm going to start down that journey to the point where I will not be in the third-party system at all, if possible.
And I think this is probably a fair point to discuss, and I don't think I've just gone over this much in my show, but when it comes to the government, when you have a government payers, it makes it very tricky for providing care and alternative pricing patterns, right? I mean, I think you can't provide free care to some patients, not others, and you can't provide discounted pricing. And so I guess, can you go over why it's important to sort of, I guess if you're in the process of third party paying yourself,
Yeah.
you start probably with the government payers for these reasons, that the extra regulations and restrictions that are imposed on you.
Right. And I think for me, it was important to do particularly Medicare first before the others, because it's Medicare really that drives all of the perverse incentives and torturous regulations, as I like to call it. I mean, they drive it, and the insurance companies then follow. It's an amazing thing. I have a hashtag called #OptOutMagic. I mean, the second you opt out of Medicare, it's like this magical release of these burdens. These burdens are no longer on you. And it just is a great way to practice medicine. It's interesting because you mentioned in some of your podcasts that it's not all physicians that listen, that you have some non-physicians who listen, and they would be very surprised to know that it was actually Medicare that put into place that you can't. So if I see a patient who's uninsured, I see someone who's uninsured, and I want to say, okay, Medicare, I might charge Medicare 150. They may pay me 75. So let me just charge this uninsured patient what Medicare would have paid me. Well, no, Medicare makes that essentially Medicare fraud. If you do that, you have to charge the uninsured patient what you bill Medicare, and then expect to get that price from them. So you would then bill them the 150 and expect to get 150 from them. So that always to me was wrong. And when I explain that to patients, they are horrified. And so when you think about some of the things that drove HMOs and all that in the early days, it was these enormous bills that uninsured or underinsured people were getting from hospitals, $500,000. Well, that was the Medicare law that mandated that, when you think about it. And so it's all of it is so messed up. And again, Medicare also, not only can they come at any time and take your money back and claim you didn't do something right, they have the legal power to basically accuse you of something like Medicare fraud and go after you in that way. So it's nice to be out of a system where a simple mistake, if they desired it to be, could be blown up into something much more serious. So I was happy to put that to rest.
It's almost like finally paying off your last mortgage payment
Exactly.
or getting out of debt, right? You oftentimes don't realize the burden you feel until it's gone. You're like, wow, that's a weight off my shoulders.
So true. And the other thing that a lot of doctors don't even realize, that many of the things that we live under, like Stark, all of that is for participating doctors in Medicare. I mean, once you opt out of Medicare, none of those things apply to you anymore. And in fact, even some of the more onerous regulations in HIPAA. Now, I'm not an attorney, so I would want somebody to spell that out for people really, really carefully, what is and what is no longer, what no longer applies to you once you opt out of Medicare. But many of those things just poof like magic, go away. And it's just an amazing thing. And actually, one of the things that I'm happy about is that I kept, even in the initial phase, through 57% of my Medicare patients stayed with me. So I had a big chunk that stayed because I kept my prices fair. And I think they looked at it and said, okay, wait a minute, am I going to give Dr. McKnight up because we have a long relationship and I think she knows my situation and cares about me for this price, which would be between $75 and $95. And for a fellowship trained rheumatologist, most of those patients decided that it was in their best interest to stay, and many of them have. And I'm cognizant they're paying out of their pocket, and so I do try to keep everything as fair as I can. But it's been successful.
Two questions about the Medicare then. One is, are you getting new patients? Because I can understand if you're an established patient, you're like, well, this is, she does a great job treating me, and she knows my problems, and everything's going well. There's no reason to switch for an affordable price.
Sure.
And the other is more a question about Medicare in general for people who don't understand, because I think in the national media, there's of course, there's this push for Medicare for all from a single payer system of some sort. And I think people forget that Medicare does not pay for everything. So can you explain sort of for the people who think, oh, once I have Medicare, everything's totally free.
Right.
That's probably not the case even in a practice like yours. And so even though you're charging some cash pay for seeing you, it may not be significantly different.
Correct.
Is that
well, I do
correct?
believe that's absolutely correct. The Medicare patient is required to pay. There's an initial, like if you have Medicare and a secondary, my understanding is that you pay your initial whatever the deductible would be, and it's always very low in Medicare. I mean, that is an advantage. However, those secondary plans are kind of expensive, and Medicare always only pays 80%, and so you're always obligated, if you don't have that secondary, to pay the extra 20%. But really, where it's some of those Medicare Advantage plans, patients are financing a lot of it themselves. I mean, they are paying higher co-pays, and all of this. But to get to the new Medicare patient, that would be an area where I probably don't see as many as I did at one time. But again, I had limited Medicare news for almost since 2010. I mean, I wasn't really openly accepting new Medicares anyway, so that wasn't really a huge transition for me. However, I have some Medicare patients that come in as news, and they come in as new patients because, frankly, they can't get in to see someone else. I mean, they're
right.
The other doctors, here's what patients don't understand. Other doctors limit their Medicare slots, so it's not like you can call up and if there's an open vacancy, of a slot, you're going to get it. No, the next Medicare slot might be 6 months down the road. And for Medicaid, that's even worse. I mean, you may never be able to get in as a new patient to see a so-called specialist who takes Medicaid. I mean, that's just almost an impossibility. So that access issue actually for some people is a lower hurdle if they're willing to come and pay the cash because they can get in. And that's what we've always said. Coverage does not always equal care. This would be a perfect example of that.
Right. Yeah. And I think you hear people talk about all the time that just because you have insurance doesn't mean you actually have any access to care.
Absolutely.
You're just carrying around a card that says, someone will pay for my care, but if they don't pay enough for anyone to make it worthwhile or make it even economically feasible, you're never going to get seen by anyone.
Correct.
I mean, I know my wife's a pediatrician, and and I don't remember what the percentages of Medicare, or Medicaid, but if she doesn't see Medicare, but if Medicaid, I think it's if you get over like 7 or 8% Medicaid, you're financially it's not viable for your practice because the overhead is so severe and the payment is so low.
Right.
It doesn't make it.
And there was a very recent. I just saw this on Twitter, and I'm not going to be able to cite where I read it, but it was talking about payors and who is most likely not to pay you for services already rendered. First was fee-for-service Medicaid. Second was Medicaid, like HMO. Third, fee-for-service Medicare. Fourth, Medicaid. I mean the Medicare replacement plans. These Advantage plans. So right there, it just goes to show you particularly those government plans. They delay payment or they don't pay. And that is a common issue. And that's one of the other frustrations that doctors feel when dealing with it. I'd like to see, frankly, what I'd really like to see, even particularly for this new expansion of Medicaid, I would have liked to have seen them do that in a different way. Possibly these are people who are working, who now have been priced out of the market to get health, insurance. So it would have been a great idea to say, okay, we're not going to put you into the traditional Medicaid. What we'll do is the government will fund for you a health savings account, and then we will allow you to use Medicaid if you get into a catastrophic situation. And what you will have this money, we will fund it every year. At the end of however many years, like maybe you give them a 5-year guarantee, then they may still have money in that health savings account if they've used it wisely. That could then go with them as they hopefully climb the ladder, get a better job, have a higher paying situation, and then may get health insurance from their new employer. Do you see what I mean? Where it doesn't commit them to a lifelong Medicaid dependency. And I think we made a big mistake with the Medicare expansion to not think differently about that. I mean, everybody wants people to have particularly catastrophic care, but this everyday access, like to your pediatrician, you should be able to go to a health savings account, go up to their front desk. What do you have for a cash price? Swipe it, your card,
right,
and not have to deal with all of that. Plus, give these people a chance to take that with them into a new job where they actually acquire something. So, of course, no one even entertained anything like that. It just would have been a smarter way to go, I think.
Yeah, and I think Seema Verma, who's the new is she the HHS director?
She's CMS director.
Yeah, she came from Indiana, and they actually instituted a similar program to what you mentioned in Indiana for their Medicaid patients. But to the point of just government payers and government regulations and rules, the state of Indiana had to request all sorts of waivers, and the ability to have innovative solutions to solve problems when you have the federal government a one-size-fits-all generally mandate. It just makes it very difficult and clunky, and it basically eliminates the opportunity to have any innovations or alternative ways of delivering care. So to what we talk about on the show a lot is that sort of thing is the thing that's an impediment to providing care and finding ways of caring for people who aren't able to, we're not able to care for right now. We can pass all the Medicaid expansions we want, but if we're unable to pay for it to make it so that people can actually keep the lights on in their practices.
Correct.
And I don't say they keep the lights on because they have to all walk away with $500,000. I mean, we're talking about truly like making more than you're losing money. And so no one's going to run any business that way. And so because you have to pay people, you have to fill out the forms and so there's a lot of overhead that goes in these practices. Right. So anyway,
well, and nor should they be expected to. I mean, basically, people look at doctors and it's like, well, that's just what you do. And it's like, well, no, I don't go bankrupt. Trying to, and then that's why I think these innovative ideas are coming out, because doctors it is the breaking point. Either you're going to literally be in the system and miserable, burned out, on the verge of some practices on the verge of bankruptcy, or you're going to try something new. And I think that's what you're seeing with these new movements. Yes. And I think it's exciting.
I think when you see that 10%, is it like that when you can offer services at 10% to what they're normally offered, then you see the innovation breaking through even when the system's sort of stacked against you because your cost savings are so significant.
Correct.
Which is why you're seeing that with DPC. I mean, now once deductibles hit a certain point, people were willing to look for other places because they're like, this is insane. I'm paying $20,000 a year in premiums.
Correct.
Plus I have a deductible that's maybe $10,000, $15,000.
Right.
I mean, we have a friend with their family, their deductible and premium is almost $50,000 a year. So for them, it's untenable, right?
Absolutely.
As it goes up. So,
well, I had a patient in the other day. I'll just give you this quick story. She had fallen and she got a fracture that needed a surgical pinning and the whole deal. And so she comes in and she's not on Medicare. She's probably in her early 60s. And then, of course, I start talking to her about osteopenia and fracture and the risk of fracture coming up in the next year and how much greater it is. We need to start some stuff, and the whole deal. And she's like, I can't do anymore, Dr. McKnight, because I pay $1,000 a month in a premium. My deductible is $10,000. This surgery was $6,500 right out of my pocket. I don't even know what else is still out there. This surprise stuff where people are getting things months after. She said, I can't do that right now, and that's a real problem, because this issue that I was trying to address with her really should have been addressed at that visit. We should have considered what other medicines we could get her on and all the rest. She was like, I can't do it. And she was unwilling to go even there down the road of conversation. She was tapped out, and that is just and she's paying $1,000 a month in a premium. And so you got to write that check on top of the $6,500. And this turns over every year. I mean, so you're really funding your healthcare, the first $20,000 or so, and maybe more a year. That has made the patient a real consumer. The problem is, if you've ever talked to Kevin Way Casey, he's the guy who does healthcare economics. His point is that patients are addicted to their insurance, and they basically think that they can't do anything. They want their insurance to pay for the doctor's visit, for instance, which is silly. It should be there for catastrophic. Well, they're paying $1,000 a month in a premium to come in and pay my $75 to $95 office visit for their insurance to pay that. That's silly. That doesn't make sense on any level. If they were just getting catastrophic coverage, the premium would be much more reduced and all the rest, and then they could get a large health savings account. So we have to change the mindset of patients as well. Doctors' mindsets are definitely changing. Patients are a little slower because they're addicted to having, quote, great coverage, which they do not have any longer. They're paying as though they have Cadillac coverage. and they really have catastrophic, if they even have that,
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Well, and I think that's just the human mind can only adapt so quickly to changing conditions, right?
Yeah. Oh, yes,
and,
I know that myself.
Right. I mean, I think physicians are the same way, right?
Yes.
You see this doc who's been practicing for 20 years. You're like, why are you still doing that?
Yeah.
That's kind of been not a discredit, but it's
just
not an effective
we don't do
treatment.
it that way anymore, and
right.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you look at how quickly healthcare has become expensive in the sense of I guess I should say how insurance has changed, and the fact that the deductibles have gone up so quickly. So within really the last 10 years,
yes.
if that.
It was Obamacare that really brought in all of that, honestly.
It probably accelerated what was already happening, right?
Oh, yeah. And I'm not blaming Obamacare for everything, but I will say it made people real consumers, because they are spending enormous money on their health coverage right now. So it made them real consumers, for sure.
Yeah, I think the breaking point was about around then, and whether that was coincidental or
right.
But certainly, I mean, more coverage, more things were forced in coverage, and all the other mandates. So one of the questions I get a lot of times when I talk to direct primary care physicians, they're obviously primary care, so they're taking care of, it lends itself to a long-standing relationship generally. Mm-hmm. And so you can envision a membership-based, practice.
Right.
With specialists, it's very different. It's sometimes episodic, like someone has some temporary condition. Rheumatology, a little different, because your patients generally have things that are chronic. But and so the question I always get from people is like, well, I really can't afford to come out of, because I'm finishing my, I did medical school, I did residency, then I did a fellowship, and I've sort of been deferring my payments or maybe making my student loan payments. I've got, $250,000 of loans. It doesn't make any sense economically for me to go out and say, I'm just going to hang up a shingle and just hope people come to see me, and I'm going to have not a concierge, but like some sort of cash pay system where I don't take insurers. I just can't survive in a market like that, because I need to pay off my debt right away.
Right.
So what would you say to people? Because I think you probably could do it either way, right? I mean, you can. So what would you recommend to new grads now?
The scenario that you just outlined, yes, that's a more difficult thing. I mean, if you get out of medical school and all the training with a lot of debt, then but I was listening at that conference where I just was to the white coat investor whose name escapes me right now. But his point was, what you do is you leave your fellowship and you still live like a fellow for 3 to 5 years and get all that paid off, and then what will happen is later, then the everything kind of flips around and you can sort of right the ship. And the other thing about employment is, if you go into employment, yes, that first few years is going to seem like a really good thing for you, because you're going from making whatever $45,000 to maybe 120 or whatever they've got you starting at. I don't know. It's not, but the difference is like threefold or what have you, and you're thinking this is the greatest thing that's ever happened. However, your chance for doing better over time is more of a flat line or a very slight increase in an employment situation. It's not like you're going to start at some sort of baseline and then go much, much higher over time. You'll get little increments so that you don't leave. But they'll do things like, apparently I've been reading some things where these young doctors start and they say, okay, you're going to need to see 15 patients a day. And then it creeps to 18, and then it creeps to 20 something. And then it creeps where you're going to supervise all the extenders. And, there's a lot added on that you have little to say about, when you are employed. Now, one thing, again, I'm not an attorney, but if I were young and I loved the idea of practicing third party free, but I didn't feel that I could, what I would try to at least get in my contract would be something along the lines of, okay, if particularly in states where the non-compete is enforceable, you could say, okay, I want this in my contract. If I leave employment with this hospital, and I leave and I go out third party free, then I'm not competing with you, because you're in on Medicare. You don't even want the people who don't. You see what I mean? So I'm not in a real, because if you've established some, so you've gotten established, you have some patients who are loyal to you, they'll follow you, but they're not going to follow you to another state, but they would follow you in that community. So some would leave with you. So you're not like going to be starting from zero. However, it is difficult to go. That was one of the reasons I believe that I was very successful in what I did, is that I had a long practice here. I had many loyal patients. Rheumatology is that way, that if they're comfortable, they have chronic illness, they like the way you're managing them, there's a loyalty there. So it is a more difficult thing, but I don't think impossible. And for the doctors who are lucky enough to leave with no debt, they should surely think of these things, because they could live like a fellow a little longer and kind of weather the storm and go. Again, I have 3 office staff. I don't have 8, 9, 10. You know what I mean? You have to have a little bit more of a streamline. But I think it can be done. But there's some that are going to be more ready to do it than others. However, the ones that can't should not be denigrating or disparaging or anything of the doctors who are breaking free. I got a little bit of that at this conference, where someone was like, well, where do you send your Medicare patients to infuse? And I said, well, they have to go to the hospital. And he said, well, but it's so much more expensive to get it done at the hospital. And I was like, well, Medicare should fix that. I mean,
it's not your problem, not your fault.
They should fix that. I mean, I'm providing my Medicare patients a service. So that is one thing I'd like folks to know, that, when you opt out of Medicare, you can still order the labs that you order at the hospital. Nothing can be done in your office for the most part, but the office visit, which the patient pays cash. And if I do an injection, they'll pay me some extra for that. But if I order lab, Medicare covers that. If I order x-rays, Medicare covers that. And that's the way it should be. I mean, they shouldn't penalize the patient who wants to see me. And so anyway, it can work in that way.
And so now you have an interesting situation. And only that you have your own infusion center, so you have an alternative stream of revenue in your office. Mm-hmm. It'd be similar to an orthopedic surgeon who has, an X-ray machine and has maybe some radiology capabilities. Or what sort of regulatory hurdles do you deal with your infusion center? Do you deal with JACO? Like the Joint Commission?
No, they don't. No, and of course, I hate to say this, maybe somebody's going to show up, but we what I mean. We don't have a lot of regulatory things that come through. I mean, OSHA could come to the door at any time, and we would have to be following whatever you follow for that. But no, we haven't really. I mean, no. And in fact, a lot of rheumatologists are doing these infusions in their offices, and they're actually, to be perfectly honest, so much better for the patient to get it in the doctor's office. It's easier, it's cheaper. These people are debilitated. It's hard for them to park 5 miles out at the hospital, and get shuttled in. Do you know what I mean? So it's a much better situation. But I do a lot less of the medication infusion. That was just something I was willing to let go, because I mean, so I still make a little revenue off of that, but the only thing I really get paid for is my nurse time. So, for instance, I buy the medications I have the patient do what's called specialty pharmacy. So I only have a few people that I buy and bill for. And what I mean by that is I pay for the medicine, I infuse it, and then I hope to be paid. I decided that was not good for my happiness quotient, because I would worry, about these unpaid claims. And then when we made a stupid mistake, which did happen occasionally, I would get frustrated by that. And I thought, you know what, I don't want to deal with that. So I make a little revenue off of that, but most of my revenue is generated by what I do. And we do things like B12 shots and things like that. And so we get a little off of those things, but so but it's working. It definitely is.
Yeah. My mother actually has rheumatoid arthritis, and she's gotten different infusions, after a while, the medicine stops working, she switches. And so they had to find an infusion center down in Florida where they winter.
Right.
And so, and same thing, it's in someone's office. And I think it's a number of rheumatologists who are in office. But one question I had about which I thought was funny, how you referred to the electronic health record. But I think very few people are fans of this. And I think patients don't realize that the reason their electronic health records are around is because it's a mandate through the, I think it's the High Tech Act.
Right.
Was sort of where it began, and then also it also ties in with HIPAA, so it allows your data as a patient to be sold to a couple million vendors in the United States, and so HIPAA, as if you want to go back and listen to my episode for those of you listening, where I talked to Twyla Bray, she talks about HIPAA and how it's not any sort of a privacy act, but it was actually an act to take your data and be able to more efficiently give it to vendors.
Portability, correct?
Portability, right. It's the portability although you're not going to have any control over it. So anyway, so it's always treated as if it's some sort of privacy protection, but it really didn't change anything with medical ethics or anything with privacy. It's all about moving your data around. But a lot of that is tied into the HRs. And so a number of years ago, I was at a conference on Mackinac Island, and I was just sitting across from a veterinarian. And I think I was even in, maybe it was residency or had just started. And he was talking about how dumb doctors were, because he's like, we have this electronic health record. We have this record system electronically, and it streamlines my service. I can keep my notes in order. I can figure out I can bill people real quickly. I can keep all the data information. I think he designed it, and he ended up selling it. So he made a decent amount of money doing this. And so for the veterinarians, it was a huge thing, because it added tremendous efficiency to their day, because they had all their stuff in one place. They're not like writing down a paper and storing it.
Right.
It's what you imagine a computer system work, right?
Right.
And yet in medicine, we have electronic health record that is completely, I don't want to say useless, but it's very cumbersome, clunky. It's hard. It's got so much extraneous information because of mandates from the government and whatnot. As someone who's outside the system, sort of, I guess you're kind of, because all the private insurers still require a lot of those same metrics to be obtained and all those. Do you use your own electronic health record, or are you planning to move away from it? I mean,
no. So
reasonable ones?
I'm glad you brought that up, because I always make the clarifying point that I have Mac computers in every room. So I use computers. I have I use something called Mac Practice, which is my office management system, which helps me with my billing and collecting, makes my appointment. It's just an amazing thing. And within that, I've developed a bit of a charting system. So there is a little bit of paper involved in the actual office visit, and then it's put into the chart. Occasionally, some insurer will want my records, and no one has ever said that they don't meet whatever the criteria they're looking for. But I never have participated in anything government related, like meaningful use, PQRs. I don't even know, honestly, what those are, because I've never done them. No, seriously. And as much as I rail on it, I'm really railing on it because I've never lived under it. And I really feel, brilliant this far in my career when I say that I've never spent one penny on the electronic health record, nor one moment of my valuable time learning how to use the electronic, because there is a learning curve. And every time you go to a new one, there's another learning curve. And the main thing for me, there are so many reasons why I loathe that, because I get those records and they're so voluminous, and they're filled with so much information that is irrelevant, that you don't need. And oftentimes the stuff that you do need is either not there or hidden. I mean, it's just
right. Oh, I totally agree.
And so we took the most important thing to our day-to-day function, the doctor's note, and allowed it to be destroyed. And so whenever I go on my rants about the EHR, people are like, well, we can't go back to paper. Well, I'm not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting is, if you took out all of the mandates, and that's where the problem comes in, because they're making you put in there, and the person has never smoked their entire life, and they're 65, and you have to constantly be updating that, you're reminding them not to smoke. It's just stuff that is so, you have doctors who never even met. And by the way, I've had folks who come to my office, patients, and they have the reams of paper that they were given when they left the doctor's office or left the ER about all the counseling that they received about this, that, and the other thing. And they say, Dr. McKnight, no one ever said any of this to me. So it builds in almost like a dishonesty. What we're trying to do is to build an honest relationship with our patients, where our patients feel like, and then you leave and it says, I counseled the patient on, riding their bike with a helmet. I counseled the patient. None of that was done. So I reject the whole thing. It's government mandated, and that's why it doesn't make any sense. And so it's a shame that doctors allowed this to happen. So I do use computers. They are very important to my day-to-day function, but I try not to let that interfere with my relationship with the patient. My relationship is with the patient, not the computer. That's another thing that adds to your happiness quotient. The other thing is, when doctors bring home work, does your wife have to bring home stuff that she's entering in, or is she efficient enough to get it done at work?
She absolutely does know. So I would say this though. I would say her time. It is somewhat better for her to have the EHR only in that she was still doing handwritten notes.
Right.
After hours, which I mean every doctor would complain about as well.
Yeah.
And now she's just doing them. But now she can do them from home as opposed to having to be in the office doing them. But
right.
I don't know that from a timing standpoint, it's been a significant difference. Maybe I think they see a few less patients, but
well,
so
I think what they pointed out in that talk I mentioned, the fact that the AMA tweeted out about the 83 minutes a night that family doctors are spending on their computers doing tasks, from their home. Yeah, and 83, that works out to 4 to 6 weeks a year. If you calculate that over a physician's lifetime, this is uncompensated work. It's like 3 and 4 years, if you're going to work for 35 years. It's as much time as you would have taken on vacation is spent at home doing that kind of stuff so I do think that's a big chunk of doctor time that is not being compensated. So to those young doctors, as we're talking about what you put in your contract, they should at least be getting, $100 an hour for what they're doing at home. And guess what? That's very documentable because you can show when you logged on and you can show when you logged off, and you could be reimbursed for that time spent. I mean, something's got to give there. Doctors should not be expected to do that with no compensation. And so for the young doctors, maybe they could get that to put in their contracts.
I mean, the interesting thing though is, these contracts, my impression with these large health systems contracts is they're really kind of pretty much non-negotiable. If you are an extremely sought after specialty, like we haven't had, we have one rheumatologist in town of 300,000. We need, 3 more.
Yep.
Maybe you have room there to negotiate something unique, but most of these are kind of boilerplate. They don't allow much for a variation. And I would say, our group for anesthesia, we're a very large anesthesia group. We are pretty much the same way. We don't say you can come in and negotiate your own terms. People try, and we're like, yeah, we're just not going to allow that,
right?
Or
Sure,
this or that,
sure.
Because it makes it too complicated from an administrative standpoint for us to try and figure out, who has what agreement for what,
Right.
So I don't know. I mean,
well, no, I agree with that. But for instance, to get to this point about whether or not your at-home work should be compensated.
I agree.
It obviously should be. And, I was this talk that I gave to the fellows, I did bring up some points of where doctors are sticking together, some examples of this. So, for instance, they had that hospital staff, that 93 doctor staff up in North Carolina that basically just went and said, we want out of our employment contract. They didn't like what was being done. And the entire hospital system just had to let them out. Now, I think they must be still using the hospital, but they're no longer employed. And so imagine if you had a group of doctors on a hospital staff who said, look, we're not going to do this free work anymore. And everybody gets the same amount. Every doctor's time, when you're talking about at-home work, should be valued the same. I mean, in RVUs and all that, sometimes I guess the surgeon gets more than the family doctor. But in this context, if you're doing at-home charting, boom, it's whatever the doctors decide if that hospital staff is going to be paid per hour done. I think they should do something like that and join together this concept that we should take this work home and that it is our duty to do it for free is nonsense, and somebody needs to end it. And so that would be, but you would need doctors standing together, standing in defense of the profession, as I like to say, where they basically fight back against some of these things. And it can be very powerful. They had down in South Florida recently the hospital staff forced the resignation of the CEO and another high-ranking administrator, because what they tried to do was change the admitting policies, which would have essentially not allowed non-employed doctors to admit. So the employed and the non-employed doctors got together, and they had a unanimous no confidence vote in these folks, and they were forced to resign. So when the staff sticks together, you really can affect change that can be good for doctors. It's all about sticking together.
Yeah. Well, I mean, attorneys charge for their time always,
Correct.
Right? I mean, there's always an hourly charge. And so it's reasonable that if you're working, I would only say, so the thing that people would say immediately is say, well, why don't doctors just unionize? Right. And I would just counter by saying what's going to happen is, but what invariably happens with unions is it sort of just protects the people who are at the bottom, who aren't
Right.
very good. And there's a dishonest aspect of it too, where, now let's just say I could say I was working 2 hours at home. Maybe I was only working an hour and a half.
Right.
There are a
Well,
lot of
although I think
difficult checks.
I agree, but I do think that would be very, I think, just like you do a time card, this is a very traceable thing. I'm just talking about just one aspect of things. You log in,
Right.
you do pay. I mean, people
Yeah,
can
yeah.
go and check that. There can be random audits of things like that, and that can be checked. So that particular example, I actually think you could get around that. But your point about unionization, that's not something that I would support. I'm not somebody who would support unionizing. That's one of the reasons that I like social media and to get on things like Twitter and things, because if all doctors did that, and everywhere I go, I ask doctors, are you on Twitter? And they almost think it's beneath the profession to be on Twitter. And I'm like, no, you need to get on there because it's a way we can communicate with each other about, what's happening in medicine. I mean, the reasons that I know some of the things we've been talking about is because I get on Twitter and an article will pop up and I'll look at it, and then, and so you get educated. I am on it for the politics and economics of medicine. I'm not really on it for, anything else. I want other doctors to understand about opt-out magic and all the rest. So I do my own little thing, but it's all about economics and politics. I ignored that my whole early career, and I think that's what got us into trouble. So I am paying attention to it now. And if all doctors did that, I just believe we could be a stronger voice, just because we all really agree for the most part. There are only very few people who don't agree with doctors becoming, like, for instance, direct primary care movement. I mean, when people hear of it, they like it. Doctors do, because they see it as a way back to some autonomy and independence for doctors. Every now and then somebody will throw in there and they don't seem to agree with it. And then you go look at their bio and their health IT or their management.
Right. Yeah. Right.
I mean, so
we're not going to know a population. How do we keep them healthy? Right.
Exactly. And so that's why union, no, more interaction through social media. Yes. The thing that I have come to know, which is a little bit disheartening to me, because when I became activated, I did go back into, I just recently finished being the president. Last year, I was president of my medical society. So I did that whole thing, and I'm still active, and started going to the FMA. And this organized medicine is it's a bureaucratic. People tell you, yeah, really, I'm on board. And then things don't happen. So that's a problem. And even our specialty societies, like I just saw something pop up, and I didn't have time to read it. It was long, but the statement now from the family practice, the Academy of Family Practice Doctors, basically on MOC, and essentially, they are, basically going along with MOC. I mean, it's all this platitudes, just platitude after platitude. They just don't say no. And it's time to do that, meaning we need, and our specialty societies aren't going to. They actually make money from all the review courses. So it's kind of this everybody against, the doctors. And until we decide we're going to just say no and stand up and defend the profession and all the rest, we're going to be up against all of that, unfortunately. Hopefully,
it's the classic.
I was going to mention just about Dr. Fisher's lawsuit.
Yes.
That's going to be big. And so I'm following that along to see if something like that were to break through, meaning doctors actually have a victory on that level. Can you imagine what that would do to the psyche of doctors? It would be very, very good for us.
Right. Well, Dr. Wax had a victory for the osteopathic physicians against the AOA, where they struck down the mandatory requirement to be members of the AOA to have a medical license. And so I tend to think, these things will happen. I'm part of organized medicine. I'm the immediate past president of the county medical society here. I'm active in our state medical society on some level. It's always difficult because everything you say is 100% correct. And the problem is when you go to Lansing for me, or if you go to DC, the AMA or the state medical societies are the face of physicians, whether you like it or not.
Oh, I know.
When the legislator sees them. And so it's always a difficult balance with how much do you want to get involved in sort of this large machine, or with your specialty societies, which have varying levels of defense of independence or protection from onerous testing when it comes to MOC, because like you said, the revenue stream comes from not membership as much as it does from the testing services. And they see that money and they realize in an era when it's difficult for physicians, well, certainly the networking aspect of these medical societies and specialty societies is not as important. So then it becomes, the question is, why do you have these societies? If sure, they do some lobbying to protect your, whatever for legislation and regulations, but you start having questions of what value am I getting from this organization if I'm not if I don't find lobbying important, do I want to be a part of it? So it's always the classic questions of, well, do you want to be, if you're not at the table, you're for dinner, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The problem is, of course, is maybe to get a seat at the table, I've got to gnaw off my foot, right? And so what are you willing to give up in order to get to the table? And to get to the table, maybe you've given up so much that now you can't get anything back, right? Those are the difficult things, like even talking to Lee Gross, how much do you get involved in and what do you do? And I think it's sort of like when I talk to other people about just politics in general, and people say, I have this message I want to get out there. What's the best way to get it done? Do I run for office? Do I work, in a nonprofit or whatever? And I always say, it's whatever you're really good at. Right. Maybe you're someone who's not any good at like talking to people on the street, and maybe you should be doing something else. Or if you're really good at that, maybe you should be running for office. Or I think you kind of just find whatever you enjoy and hope that there are enough other people with the same thought that you energize them to get involved in whatever way they feel is most important or they're most effective. Because I think you just never really know. Yep. And so I don't know. I don't have a better answer than to say, I think just do something.
Right. I think all doctors should do something. I agree with you there. And I actually am still, I'm still involved with, like I say, you and I must have been presidents at the same time. Were you president in 2018 of your medical society? And I was
just the county. Yeah.
And my county's medical society, but I'm still going to I'm going as a delegate to FMA again this year. Yeah, and me too. So I'm doing all of that and everything, but I still think there would be something. I worry that those, pathways are going to not get us quite where we want to be. There is one way that could change, however, if there are some significant victories, like with this new lawsuit that's going forward. And again, because then they have to come around because they can't just drag their feet any longer. I was unfortunately told that that this upcoming 2 years in Florida, the legislative session is pretty much, we're going to be in a defensive mode because they're going to try to stop expansion of scope and all that. But as far as really trying to advance things like MOC, they're not even going there because we apparently the way the legislature is set up this year, we have some people that are not friends of doctors that are in high places. And so, so we've got 2 years where everybody's just decided to be kind of sedentary and we're going to see what happens with that. But thankfully in other parts of the country, things are going forward. And I'm encouraged by what I see Dr. Lee Gross and Atlas MD, those guys doing, because I believe Lamar Alexander is kind of paying attention to them up there on the federal level. And that could be big too if a lot of things break for DPC, because I believe DPC, because it is such a direct relationship with patients and it cuts out all of the superfluous intermediaries, if they have success there, it's going to show a lot of all doctors what can be done. And then maybe more specialists will do things like I'm doing with fair cash pricing and all of that. And it could really break out a percentage of doctors. And that's always good, even for the doctors who remain in. It's good there's a small percentage of doctors who are broken out and are doing something different because it keeps the, bureaucrats and the overlords and all, it keeps them guessing and it keeps them on their toes. And they know that they better be good to the doctors who stay in. That's what I would think would be the ultimate of that, kind of sequelae of those doctors breaking away could be better for the doctors staying in, honestly.
I don't think there's any question about that. And I think a great example of people breaking the norm, and whatever one may think of homeschooling. At one time, homeschooling was, only weirdos are doing it. It's super rare.
Yep.
It's not something that, kids aren't going to learn anything, et cetera, et cetera. It has become an established practice in all 50 states now. It's whether you want to do it or not, people do not look at it as that you are doing something that is harming the kid. I mean, well, maybe they do think that, but and similar to DPC, I truly feel as you do that by just showing that you can practice medicine sort of the way patients and physicians generally want it practiced on a primary care level and potentially other, and other specialties, that you've shown that the system as it is now, that we already know it's all broken and it's too expensive and whatever, but you're going to show that there's a way of providing the same quality care, maybe even better care at a fraction of the cost. People are going to say, why are we doing it? And so I think so I'm not worried about things like what's going on in New Hampshire. You mentioned in your email about the state legislatures talking about banning physicians from, practicing this way. I mean, there are all kinds of crazy laws that go into state legislatures that never get to committee level or anything like that. I mean,
some crazy out there.
Yeah, someone put it in.
An idea. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And no, I mean, it could happen, I suppose, but it would be, it will get to some point where, and there will probably be some pushback significant in a couple of years, I think, to DPC, much like it was with homeschooling. I mean, it was like there were the vested interests that are opposed to homeschooling, did everything they could to stop it.
Correct.
And then they realized there's too much groundswell support from the people who care most about it, namely the people whose kids are being educated. In this case, it'd be patients, right?
Right.
Because they have the most vested interest in their health, the people who are actually, it's their own health, right?
Right.
And so once they speak up, then it doesn't matter what anybody wants is from the government standpoint, because people are just they'll demand it.
Right.
And so I think you'll see that. I think you're going to see some vociferous response in a couple of years, but it will be too late because the method will be proven to be useful.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
effective.
interesting because I think why you're not seeing quite that negative response to DPC yet is because it's so small, but you realize that in like a 7-year period, I mean, there's been like almost exponential growth of it. And and I think the next few years, as you mentioned, that it'll go even higher. And that's when the people who are going to lose in this arrangement are going to start speaking out and really disparage it. So hopefully the DPC folks are ready for that onslaught. I believe that they are, because you're right. I hadn't even thought about it in that way, that probably once it gets a little bigger and people are really threatened by it, the profiteers, as I like to call them, they will start trying to, well, they already do. This is the one thing I'll say about that. When you hear someone disparage DPC, it's often because, well, it doesn't solve every single problem. Well, of course, nothing does. So, but what has Medicare ever solved every healthcare problem? Did Medicaid? Would Medicare for all? No, no system solves everything. But it doesn't mean, and so I had a tweet, something along those lines saying, stop holding DPC to the standard because it's ridiculous. No way of delivering care solves every problem. The question is, can we do it better? And I believe that is an avenue, and it's an avenue which gives doctors their independence back. And that to me is the most important part of it all, because we then become the professionals that we were meant to be, as opposed to data entry clerks, and I think it's a whole different model. So I'm looking forward to seeing that go forward and how that will all turn out.
Yeah, I'm actually very encouraged by everything. I think, and I think for patients, it's going to be a great thing. And I think those are the people. I mean, the patients are the ones who are going to benefit the most from this. I think we're seeing the beginning of a revolution, and we just need to. When we look back about 5 years from now, I think we're going to recognize what's happened. I just look at our town, and we've gone from 2 to 4 practices in a year of DPC, and I suspect that as it's seen as to work, residents are going to flock towards it. I do. And,
I agree.
Well, we could talk here for about it forever.
Absolutely. I know.
And I'm going to have to wrap it up. And thank you so much for being on, Ellen McKnight. So best places to find you. I mean, you're at Twitter. I think you're at McKnight MD Ellen.
Yeah. So it's Dr. L at McKnight MD Ellen. I'd love anybody to follow me. And like I say, I love to do all my medical politics. I try to make it clever, but I really retweet and repost a lot of information about the DPC movement because I am a big supporter. So I'm just encouraged by the whole thing, as you are. I think we're seeing change, and that's exactly what we need to see.
Well, thank you so much for being
again.
outspoken advocate for physicians to reclaim their independence and practice medicine the way they want to, instead of at the dictates of a larger entity. So thanks again.
Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
Yeah.
Bye.
You too. Bye.
Thanks for listening to The Paradox. If you like what the doc is doing, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher. And share the show with your friends. Become a supporting listener to get access to special bonuses at patreon.com/theparadox. Show notes can be found at theparadox.com.